On his wedding day, he found out the alien girl was his real sister. But still, he did that. Dr. Maxwell's hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the sterile lighting above the operating table. The weight of humanity's first alien encounter pressed down on his shoulders like a physical burden. Before him lay a being not of Earth, a slender, feminine figure with skin the color of golden-green sunlight filtering through spring leaves. Her features were almost human, disquietingly so, save for the elongated leaf-shaped ears and closed eyelids that he knew concealed pools of liquid amber. "Vitals holding steady," Nurse Alara reported, her voice barely above a whisper, as though speaking too loudly might shatter the surreal atmosphere that had enveloped Laboratory 7 since the recovery team had brought the alien in from the Zeta 4 crash site. Maxwell nodded, his throat dry. Temperature? 94.3, lower than human baseline, but consistent since arrival. The xenobiologist studied the monitors, trying to decode the unusual patterns flickering across the screens. 6 hours ago, this being had been inside a crashed vessel of unknown origin. Now she lay unconscious on his table, breathing an oxygen mix that, thankfully, seemed compatible with her physiology. Alara leaned closer, her dark eyes wide with a mixture of scientific curiosity and primal unease. "Her biology makes absolutely no sense, Doctor. The preliminary scans show organ structures unlike anything in our databases. That central cavity where a human heart would be, what do you think it contains?" "That's why we're here," Maxwell muttered, adjusting his glasses nervously. He reached for the advanced internal scanner, a prototype worth more than his lifetime salary, to understand what she is and whether she represents a threat to Earth. The laboratory doors hissed open as Dr. Leon entered, followed by 2 other scientists from the xenobiology team. Their faces reflected the same cocktail of emotions Maxwell felt coursing through his own veins: fear, wonder, and the intoxicating thrill of discovery. "Has she shown any signs of consciousness?" Leon asked, pulling on his gloves with practiced precision. Maxwell shook his head. "None. Whatever the crash did to her, or perhaps our atmosphere, she remains unresponsive to stimuli." The alien's chest rose and fell in a rhythm slightly faster than a human's. Her skin had a subtle luminescence to it, as though light lived just beneath the surface. Maxwell had spent his entire career studying non-terrestrial biology and theory. Nothing had prepared him for this moment. "The higher-ups are getting anxious," Leon whispered, glancing toward the observation window where military personnel stood watching. "They want answers before she wakes up." "Science doesn't work on military timetables," Maxwell replied, though he understood the urgency. If there were others like her, if this was a precursor to something larger. "Activating internal scan," he announced, positioning the scanner above the alien's torso. The machine hummed to life, its beam invisible but powerful, designed to map every cell and structure within her body without invasive procedures. The other doctors gathered around, faces taut with anticipation. The moment the bioscanner's energy field made contact with her chest, everything changed. Her body twitched violently, back arching against the restraints. "Something's happening," Leon said, stepping back instinctively. Maxwell moved forward rather than away, medical training overriding fear. "Vitals spiking, heart rate, or whatever corresponds to it, nearly doubled." The alien's neck began to bulge unnaturally, the golden-green skin stretching like elastic. Her jaw, previously relaxed in unconsciousness, slowly opened, wider than human anatomy would allow. "Oh my God," Alara whispered, backing against the instrument tray with a clatter. "Oh my God!" Without warning, a slender, serpentine form emerged from between the alien's lips. It glowed with an inner light, its translucent body pulsing with electric blue luminescence. The snake-like entity, no thicker than a human finger, hovered in the air above the alien's face. Then came another, and another. By the time the third luminous serpent had emerged from her mouth, the entire medical team had retreated to the laboratory walls. The snakes, if that term even applied to these otherworldly manifestations, shimmered like liquid neon, their bodies undulating with crackling pulses of bioelectric light. "Nobody move," Maxwell whispered, his scientific mind racing to comprehend what he was witnessing. Were they parasites? Symbiotes? Some kind of biological defense mechanism? The entities made no aggressive moves. Instead, they began to circle above the alien's body in a mesmerizing dance, their movements synchronized as though orchestrated by a single mind. Then in the midst of this impossible scene, the alien's eyes opened. Amber eyes, pupilless and radiant, surveyed the frozen humans with calm intelligence. There was no fear in those otherworldly orbs, only a profound peacefulness that somehow intensified the humans' terror. The glowing serpents continued their aerial ballet around her, occasionally emitting soft pulses of light that corresponded with the alien's breathing. "They are not parasites," she whispered in perfect, accented English that sent chills racing down Maxwell's spine. Her voice was musical, yet slightly dissonant, like an instrument tuned to unfamiliar harmonics. "They are me." Ilara's clipboard clattered to the floor. "How can you speak our language? Acquisition is simple for my kind," the alien replied, her eyes never leaving Maxwell's. "Your global communication signals have been reaching our receivers for decades." Maxwell took a cautious step forward, scientific curiosity gradually overcoming fear. "What do you mean they're you? Those entities are extensions of your body?" A small smile played across the alien's lips. "Too human, yet not human enough. Your species thinks in such compartmentalized ways. Separate organs, separate systems, separate individuals. My kind evolved differently." One of the glowing serpents detached from the circling formation and drifted toward Maxwell. Behind him, he could hear Leon's sharp intake of breath, could sense the military personnel beyond the glass reaching for weapons. "Please," the alien said, her voice taking on an urgent quality. "Do not be afraid. They will not harm you. They are sensory projections, neural extensions of my consciousness. They allow me to perceive in ways your bodies cannot." The luminous entity stopped less than a foot from Maxwell's face, hovering at eye level. Up close, he could see that what appeared to be scales were actually minute filaments of light, pulsing in complex patterns. "What are you?" he asked, barely recognizing his own voice. "A traveler," she replied. "An explorer, like yourself. My designation in your phonetic system would approximate to Lyra." Dr. Leon had recovered enough composure to join Maxwell. "What the hell does that mean? Neural extensions. They came out of your mouth." Maxwell's fingers moved to the scanner controls, adjusting to focus on one of the floating entities. The results flooding the screen confirmed the impossible. They're not separate organisms. They're composed of the same cellular structure as her nervous system, but configured differently, like externalized neural tentacles. Intelligent, self-aware extensions of her consciousness. "A hive organism within a single body," Leon whispered. Before anyone could process this revelation, one of the serpentine projections gracefully approached Dr. Leon's face. The room fell into terrified silence. No one moved as the glowing entity hovered before him, then gently touched his forehead. Leon gasped, his eyes widening. His body tensed, then relaxed, his expression transforming from fear to wonder in the span of seconds. I can hear her," he said in awe. "Not words, but impressions, feelings, memories. She's communicating directly with my mind." Maxwell watched in fascination as Leon's eyes unfocused slightly, clearly experiencing something beyond ordinary perception. The military personnel were shouting something from beyond the glass, but in this moment they seemed infinitely distant and irrelevant. "What is she showing you?" Maxwell asked, torn between scientific documentation and raw human curiosity. Leon's voice came dreamily. "Stars, seen from unfamiliar angles. A world with 3 moons, cities built within living structures that grow and breathe. And her mission. She's a scientist, like us. She came to observe, to understand." The glowing serpent withdrew from Leon's forehead, rejoining its companions in their orbital dance around Lyra. Gradually, one by one, the luminous entities returned to the alien's body, slipping beneath her skin like water absorbing into cloth, leaving faint trails of light that slowly faded. The lab fell silent except for the steady beep of monitoring equipment. Lyra's chest rose and fell in that slightly too quick rhythm. The monitors displayed readings that were becoming more stable, more baseline, whatever baseline might mean for her species. "She wasn't attacking us," Maxwell said softly, turning to face the team. "She was reaching out the only way she knows how." In that moment, a harsh red light flooded the laboratory as alarms began to sound. On the main diagnostic screen, a message flashed ominously. "Class 5, biothreat detected. Terminate subject immediately. Containment protocols initiated." The laboratory doors sealed with a pneumatic hiss as decontamination procedures automatically engaged. Through the observation window, Maxwell could see soldiers donning hazmat gear, preparing to enter. "No," he said, looking back at Lyra's face, so alien yet filled with unmistakable intelligence and emotion. "She's not a threat. She's a miracle." Lyra's amber eyes met his, filled with quiet gratitude. One last small serpent of light emerged from her palm, stretching across the space between them to touch Maxwell's wrist with gentle luminescence. In that moment of connection, Maxwell understood three things with absolute clarity. Lyra had come in peace, others would follow, and humanity was woefully unprepared for what was coming. The decontamination gas hissed from ceiling vents, filling the laboratory with a fine sterilizing mist. Outside, through the reinforced glass, hazmat-suited figures prepared breach protocols. They had perhaps 3 minutes before military intervention. "We need to stop them," Ilara said, her voice steady despite the fear etched on her face. "If they treat her as a threat, they'll destroy the greatest discovery in human history," Maxwell finished. He turned to the alien. "Lyra, I need you to understand. Some of my people are afraid of you. They don't comprehend what you are." Lyra's golden-green features remained serene, though her eyes tracked the movements beyond the glass with clear intelligence. "Fear is universal, Doctor." "Maxwell, it serves evolutionary purpose across many worlds. Can you show them what you showed Leon? Make them understand you're not a threat?" A flicker of something like sadness crossed her face. "The neural connection requires proximity and receptiveness. Those preparing to enter with weapons will not be receptive." Leon moved to the communications panel, frantically typing override codes. "The systems locked us out. Containment protocols have full priority." Maxwell felt the weight of impossible responsibility settle on his shoulders. Humanity's first alien contact balancing on the edge of a knife. Peace or violence separated by moments and misunderstanding. "Your monitors," Lyra said suddenly, her voice carrying unexpected urgency. "They detected my defensive capabilities and categorized them as weapons." "Defensive capabilities?" Maxwell echoed. In answer, Lyra sat up on the examination table, moving with fluid grace despite her recent unconsciousness. The restraints that had loosely held her, more medical precautions in prison, fell away easily. "My kind evolved on a predator-heavy world," she explained. Golden-green fingers tracing patterns in the air that left momentary trails of light. "The neural projections you witnessed serve multiple purposes: communication, sensation, and when necessary, defense." As if summoned by her words, a small luminous serpent emerged from her wrist, spiraling around her forearm like living jewelry. Unlike before, this one pulsed with a deeper, more intense light. "You can fight?" Ilara asked, watching the entity with fascination. "I can protect," Lyra corrected. "There is a distinction my people hold sacred." The laboratory doors shuddered as external overrides began to disengage the locks. 1 minute, perhaps less, before armed entry. Maxwell made a decision. Moving to the central console, he pulled up the biohazard readings that had triggered the alarm. The scanner detected electrical discharge capabilities in those neural extensions, similar enough to electric eels or certain deep-sea creatures that the system flagged them as weapons. His fingers flew across the keyboard, diving into the security protocols he'd helped design years earlier. "I can manually override the threat classification, but I need administrative authorization." Leon stepped forward. "Use mine. Whatever consequences come, we'll face them together." As Leon's clearance codes unlocked the deeper system settings, Maxwell became acutely aware of Lyra watching him. When he glanced up, he found her amber eyes regarding him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Your willingness to risk your position to protect me? It is unexpected," she said softly. "Is it?" Maxwell asked, not looking up from his work. "Wouldn't your people do the same for a peaceful visitor?" A small smile played across her alien features. "They would. Perhaps we are not so different after all." The biosecurity alert on the screens flickered and changed from red to yellow as Maxwell's override took effect. The laboratory doors stopped their unlocking sequence, the status returning to containment stable. Through the glass, he could see confused communications happening among the response team. For the moment, they had bought time. Ilara exhaled shakily. "That was too close." "It's temporary," Maxwell cautioned, turning back to Lyra. "I've reclassified you as a non-hostile xenobiological entity, but someone higher up can reverse that. We need to establish communication with your people. Prove that peaceful contact is possible. Lyra's head tilted slightly, a gesture unnervingly similar to human body language, yet subtly different. My ship contained communication equipment, but it was damaged in the crash. The crash site is under military control now, Leon said. They've cordoned off 10 square miles around it. Maxwell ran a hand through his hair, mind racing. Then we need to make a case they can't ignore. Lyra, would you be willing to share more of your knowledge with us? If we can demonstrate the scientific and cultural value of peaceful exchange? He stopped as Lyra raised a six-fingered hand. The luminous serpent coiled around her arm had grown agitated, its light pulsing in rapid, irregular patterns. Others approach, she said, her melodic voice taking on a new tension. Their intentions are aggressive. As if confirming her words, new figures appeared in the observation area. Not scientists or medical personnel, but stern-faced individuals in unmarked black suits. One of them spoke into the intercom, his voice filling the laboratory. Dr. Maxwell, this is Director Harlow of Special Operations. Your security clearance has been temporarily suspended. Stand down and prepare for extraction of the subject. Maxwell felt his heart sink. Harlow represented the elements within the government most paranoid about extraterrestrial contact, those who saw any unknown as a potential threat to be contained or eliminated. Director, Maxwell replied, trying to keep his voice level, I need to emphasize that we are in the middle of establishing peaceful communication with an intelligent species. Any interruption could set human-alien relations back decades. Your concerns are noted, Doctor, Harlow cut in coldly, but national security protocols override scientific curiosity. The entity will be transferred to a secure facility for proper assessment. Maxwell glanced at Lyra, seeing in her alien eyes an understanding that transcended their biological differences. She knew exactly what proper assessment would mean: dissection, experimentation, captivity. I cannot allow that, Maxwell said quietly, more to Lyra than to Harlow. The intercom clicked off. Moments later, warning lights began to flash as security overrides initiated from outside the laboratory. Leon moved to the equipment cabinets, frantically gathering portable monitoring devices. We need evidence, recordings, scans, anything that proves her peaceful intentions. Ilara positioned herself at the door. Whatever we're going to do, we need to do it quickly. In the center of this human chaos, Lyra remained unnaturally still, only her eyes moving as she observed their reactions. Then, with deliberate slowness, she extended her arm toward Maxwell, the luminous neural extension still wrapped around it, pulsing with gentle light. There is another way, she said, her voice carrying over the alarm klaxons, a more direct understanding. Maxwell understood immediately. Like what you showed Leon. A neural connection. Deeper, she replied, a full sharing of minds. Among my people, it is reserved for moments of greatest importance or intimacy. It would allow you to know me completely, my intentions, my knowledge, my truth. The implications were staggering. Direct alien to human consciousness transfer. The ultimate proof that communication was possible. Will it harm me? Maxwell asked, scientific caution warring with desperate need for a solution. It will change you, Lyra answered with brutal honesty. Knowledge always does. The laboratory doors began to open, security protocols finally overridden from outside. Maxwell made his decision, stepping forward and extending his hand toward Lyra's. Show me, he said. The luminous serpent uncurled from her arm and moved toward him just as the doors slid fully open and armed personnel rushed in. The moment the glowing entity made contact with Maxwell's skin, the world dissolved into pure sensation. Colors he had no names for flooded his consciousness. Sounds beyond human hearing range sang through his mind. The hard boundaries of his self, the comforting delineation between me and not me that defines human existence, became permeable, flexible. Distantly, as though watching through water, he was aware of his physical body standing motionless in the laboratory, while armed personnel shouted orders that seemed absurdly irrelevant. Leon and Ilara had positioned themselves between the soldiers and where he stood with Lyra, their voices raised in scientific protest. None of it mattered. He was simultaneously here and elsewhere, experiencing memories not his own. He felt himself flying through space without a ship, protected only by the neural extensions of his body. No, her body, extending outward to create a protective field against the vacuum. He felt the joyous communion of minds as Lyra's species greeted one another, their neural projections intertwining in complex dances of shared thought and emotion. He witnessed the majestic cities of her homeworld, organic structures that pulsed with life, buildings that were neither fully alive nor fully inanimate, but something gloriously in between. He understood suddenly that Lyra's people made no distinction between technology and biology. The dichotomy that defined human progress was meaningless to them. Most profoundly, he experienced her purpose. Lyra was what her people called a bridge finder, one sent ahead to discover new intelligent species and establish first contact. She had studied hundreds of civilizations across the stars, but humans had captured special interest because of their contradictory nature, their capacity for both tremendous violence and transcendent compassion. "We have been watching for centuries," her thoughts explained within his mind. "Learning your languages, studying your development, you stand at a precipice, either to join the greater community of sentient beings or to destroy yourselves before you can mature." Maxwell's scientific mind struggled to process the flood of information. Star maps showing hundreds of inhabited worlds connected through a network of communication and cooperation. Biological sciences, centuries beyond Earth's understanding. Philosophical concepts that had no equivalent in human thought. "Why come now?" he asked without speaking, his consciousness communicating directly with hers. The answer unfolded not as words but as understanding. Earth had reached a critical point in its development. The decisions made in the next few decades would determine humanity's fate. Lyra's people believed in non-interference, but they also believed in offering a hand to species ready to see beyond their planetary boundaries. "You were not meant to find me yet," came her thoughts, tinged with regret. The crash was unexpected. My mission was observation only, but now everything had changed. First contact had happened prematurely, chaotically, with military involvement, rather than careful diplomatic preparation. Through the deepening connection, Maxwell sensed something else, a signal, regular and patterned, emanating from Lyra's consciousness. She was broadcasting their experiences to others of her kind, sharing real-time information about this unexpected development. "They are coming," she confirmed as she sensed his awareness of the signal, "not to conquer or intervene, but to witness. What happens here will determine much." The laboratory scene came back into sharper focus as the neural connection began to fade. Maxwell became aware of Director Harlow's voice, harsh with authority, ordering soldiers to separate him from the alien. He felt hands gripping his shoulders, pulling him backward. The luminous serpent that had connected him to Lyra's mind retreated, leaving him momentarily disoriented as the boundaries of his consciousness snapped back into familiar human limitations. The loss of that expanded awareness felt like having senses amputated. "Detain Dr. Maxwell and his team for security debriefing," Harlow was saying, his voice hard with barely controlled anger. "Prepare the subject for transport to Facility 7. Maxwell struggled against the soldier's grip, his mind still reeling from what he'd experienced. "You don't understand what you're doing," he shouted, the words feeling clumsy after the perfect communion of direct thought transfer. "She's a peaceful emissary. Others are coming." Harlow's expression darkened. "Others? You've been compromised, Doctor. We don't know what that thing did to your mind." Two soldiers approached Lyra, weapons raised, while a third prepared what looked like a specialized containment device. The alien made no move to resist, her amber eyes fixed on Maxwell with an expression of profound sadness. "Please," Maxwell begged, looking past Harlow to the other scientists in the room. "She showed me their civilization. They've achieved what we can only dream of: unity, exploration, understanding across differences we can't imagine. This is our chance." Leon stepped forward despite the soldiers. "I experienced it too, Director. The neural connection contains no malicious elements. It's pure communication, more advanced than anything we've developed." Harlow remained unmoved. "The subject will be studied thoroughly under controlled conditions. If what you're saying is true, we'll discover it. If not, we'll have protected national security interests." As the soldiers reached for Lyra, something changed in her posture. The serene acceptance vanished, replaced by a quiet determination. Her golden-green skin began to pulse with subtle light, not frightening, but with undeniable power. "I regret this necessity," she said, her voice carrying easily through the commotion, "but I cannot allow myself to be imprisoned and dissected. My mission is too important. From every surface of her body, dozens of luminous serpents emerged simultaneously, more than they had seen before, each one pulsing with synchronized light. They spread outward like a living sphere of radiance around her. The soldiers hesitated, weapons half raised. "Stand down," Harlow barked. "Fire if it makes any aggressive move." Maxwell broke free from his captors, placing himself between the soldiers and Lyra. "She isn't aggressive, she's defensive. Lower your weapons and you'll see." For several heartbeats, the laboratory balanced on the knife edge of violence. Then, unexpectedly, the facility lights flickered and died, plunging them into darkness, broken only by the glow of Lyra's neural extensions and emergency backup lighting. In the semi-darkness, her voice emerged calm and clear. "Your weapons cannot harm me, but I have no desire to harm you. I offer knowledge freely given, connection freely offered. What you do with that offer will shape the course of your species' future." As she spoke, one of the luminous serpents extended toward the laboratory's main display screen. Upon contact, the screen flickered to life despite the power outage, displaying images that made everyone in the room fall silent with awe. Stars, planets, civilizations, technologies beyond human imagining, medical advances that could end disease, energy systems that could end pollution and resource wars, and spacecraft, beautiful organic vessels that traveled between worlds in ways that defied current physics. "This could be humanity's future," Lyra said softly as the images continued to unfold. "Not given, earned. Not through conquest, but cooperation." Even Harlow seemed momentarily speechless, his eyes fixed on the display. In that moment of stunned silence, Lyra turned to Maxwell. "The choice now lies with you," she said. "My people approach. They will arrive within your solar system in 3 of your days. What they find here will determine whether formal contact proceeds or whether Earth will be left to develop in isolation for another century." Dawn broke over the research complex, painting the reinforced windows with golden light that reminded Maxwell painfully of Lyra's skin. 24 hours had passed since the confrontation in the laboratory. 24 hours of interrogations, medical examinations, and heated debates among increasingly high-level officials. Maxwell sat alone in a sterile debriefing room, empty coffee cups littering the table before him. His eyes burned from fatigue, but his mind remained crystal clear, permanently altered by the alien communion. Fragments of Lyra's consciousness lingered within him. Star maps, mathematical concepts, and emotional imprints from a mind evolved under different suns. The door opened, admitting Director Harlow. The man looked as exhausted as Maxwell felt, his customary crisp appearance frayed at the edges. "Your neural scans are unlike anything our specialists have seen," Harlow said without preamble, dropping a file onto the table. "There are new connections forming in your brain, structures that shouldn't be possible." Maxwell nodded tiredly. "I tried to explain. The communion with Lyra wasn't just communication, it was transformation. She showed me things human minds weren't evolved to comprehend, and my brain is adapting. And you still maintain these changes aren't harmful." "They're the opposite of harmful," Maxwell said with quiet certainty. "They're evolutionary. Where is she now?" Harlow's expression tightened. "The subject is secure." "Her name is Lyra," Maxwell corrected, a flash of anger giving his voice unexpected strength. "And she's not a lab specimen. She's a diplomat from a civilization that could either elevate humanity to the stars or leave us floundering in our own mistakes for another 100 years. Something shifted in Harlow's expression, not quite softening, but a crack appearing in his rigid professionalism. He sat down across from Maxwell, rubbing his temples. 4 hours ago, our deep space monitoring stations detected anomalous objects decelerating at the edge of our solar system, he said quietly. 7 vessels of unknown configuration, approaching at speeds that should be impossible. They'll reach Earth orbit in approximately 48 hours. Maxwell felt his heart leap. "They're coming, just as she said." "Yes," Harlow admitted, "which lends credibility to your account. The President has convened an emergency security council. I've been instructed to evaluate your recommendations, given your unique perspective on the situation." The implications weren't lost on Maxwell. The government was terrified, grasping for guidance in humanity's first confirmed extraterrestrial contact situation. Despite their suspicion of his altered mind, or perhaps because of it, he now represented their best hope for understanding what was coming. First, you need to release Lyra from whatever containment you put her in, Maxwell said firmly. Her people will know how she's been treated. They can sense her condition across vast distances. It's part of their biological communication network. Harlow frowned. The alien remains under observation for security reasons. There are 7 ships approaching Earth that could likely reduce this facility to atoms if they wished. Maxwell interrupted. Your security reasons are about to become irrelevant on a cosmic scale. Lyra's people don't want conflict, but they will protect their own. A tense silence stretched between them. Finally, Harlow nodded curtly. I'll recommend her transfer to a more appropriate diplomatic setting. What else? Maxwell gathered his thoughts, drawing on the fragments of alien wisdom now integrated into his mind. Prepare a global announcement. This can't be hidden or controlled by any single nation. The approaching ships will be visible to astronomers worldwide within hours. The panic will be far worse if people think their governments are hiding alien contact, Maxwell finished. Transparency is our only option. Lyra's people value it above almost everything else. Harlow made notes on his tablet, his expression unreadable. Continue. Assemble a first contact team, not just military and intelligence personnel, but linguists, cultural anthropologists, philosophers, artists. Lyra's species communicates through multiple modalities simultaneously. They'll expect to interface with the full spectrum of human thought and expression. As Maxwell spoke, memories from the neural communion surfaced. Protocols Lyra's people had developed over millennia of peaceful first contacts with other species. He described communication frameworks, cultural exchange methodologies, and diplomatic approaches designed specifically for emerging spacefaring civilizations. Harlow listened with increasing attention, his initial skepticism gradually giving way to something approaching respect. You genuinely believe they come in peace, he said finally. It wasn't a question. Maxwell met his gaze steadily. I've seen their civilization, Director. They've moved beyond the phase where conquest or domination holds any value. They're explorers and knowledge seekers, like the best of humanity. Yet they possess technologies that could easily overwhelm our defenses. Yes, Maxwell acknowledged, just as we possess technologies that could overwhelm less developed human societies. The question isn't whether they could harm us, it's whether they want to, and they don't. The conversation was interrupted as the door opened again. Leon and Alara entered, escorted by security personnel, but no longer treated as detainees. Behind them came a senior military officer Maxwell didn't recognize, his uniform adorned with the insignia of the Joint Chiefs. Dr. Maxwell, the officer said, his voice carrying the weight of authority, I'm General Blackwood. The President has requested your presence at an emergency briefing in 1 hour. We're flying you to a secure location. Maxwell stood, fatigue momentarily forgotten. I'll need my team, and Lyra must come too. Blackwood exchanged glances with Harlow, some unspoken communication passing between them. After a moment's hesitation, the general nodded. Arrangements for the ambassador are being made. Your colleagues will accompany us as scientific advisors. As they were escorted from the room, Leon fell into step beside Maxwell. The neural connection, he whispered urgently. It's still affecting you, isn't it? I can see it in your eyes. Maxwell nodded slightly. Parts of her are still with me. Knowledge mainly. Perspectives that humans never evolved to have. Is it permanent? I hope so, Maxwell replied honestly. We're going to need every advantage to navigate what's coming. The facility bustled with frantic activity as they made their way toward the helipad on the roof. Personnel rushed through corridors, security protocols shifted visibly from containment to preparation, and throughout it all, Maxwell felt a growing sense of something momentous approaching. A threshold humanity was about to cross with no possibility of return. As they emerged onto the roof, the morning sunlight momentarily blinded him. When his vision cleared, he saw Lyra waiting beside the helicopter, her golden-green skin luminous in the dawn light. She was no longer dressed in medical garb, but in a simple white garment that somehow accentuated her alien physiology while acknowledging human norms of dignity. 2 small neural projections, the luminous serpents that had so terrified them initially, coiled gently around her shoulders, pulsing with calm, regular light. The soldiers flanking her maintained a respectful distance rather than a threatening posture. When she saw Maxwell, her amber eyes lit with recognition and what might have been relief. Your mind remains connected, she observed as he approached. The communion was successful. Yes, Maxwell confirmed, feeling the resonance between his altered consciousness and her presence. Though I understand only fragments. It is enough, she said simply. My people will be pleased. The first communion is always the most difficult, the most dangerous. That your mind adapted so well speaks to your species' potential. General Blackwood cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with their easy familiarity. We need to depart immediately. The president is waiting. As they boarded the helicopter, Maxwell found himself seated directly across from Lyra. The thumping rotors began to spin, preparing for takeoff. Through the window, he could see the research facility shrinking below them. The place where humanity's understanding of its place in the universe had irrevocably changed. Are you afraid? He asked Lyra, raising his voice above the engine noise. Her alien features composed themselves into what he now recognized as a smile, not quite human, but expressing the same essential emotion. Fear serves little purpose now. What comes is already in motion. And what exactly is coming? Lyra's neural projections pulsed with colors that seemed to respond to her thoughts. An invitation, she said. An opportunity. A test. What kind of test? The kind all young species face when they discover they are not alone, she replied, her eyes meeting his with ancient wisdom. The test of whether you can overcome your divisions long enough to see yourselves as others see you. Not as Americans or Russians or Chinese, but as humans. One species among many in a cosmos far more crowded and connected than you have imagined. The helicopter banked sharply, heading toward Washington. Below them, the landscape unfolded. Cities and farmlands, forests and highways, all human constructions that suddenly seemed so fragile and provincial in the context of what Maxwell now knew existed among the stars. And if we fail this test, he asked, though part of him already knew the answer, then you will be left to grow further, Lyra said gently, left to overcome your divisions in your own time, in your own way. My people do not interfere with natural development. We merely offer doors to those ready to walk through them. Maxwell felt the weight of impossible responsibility. Somehow, through the random chance of being the xenobiologist on duty when Lyra was brought in, he had become the fulcrum upon which humanity's cosmic future might pivot. I don't know if we're ready, he admitted quietly. Lyra's expression softened. One of her neural projections extended slightly toward him, not making contact, but offering the possibility. No species ever feels ready, Doctor. Maxwell, that is precisely when they are. As the helicopter sped toward a confrontation with history, Maxwell made his decision. He extended his hand, allowing the luminous serpent to make contact once more. The connection was gentler this time, more controlled. A bridge between two minds, two species, two possible futures. In that communion of consciousness, Maxwell saw what might be possible if humanity rose to meet the moment. Earth joining a network of worlds, human minds expanded beyond their evolutionary limitations. Centuries of struggle giving way to millennia of discovery and growth. We will try, he promised, speaking not just for himself but for his species. Flawed, violent, beautiful humanity, poised at the edge of its cosmic adolescence. We will try to be worthy of what you offer. Lyra's answer came not in words but in shared understanding, a vision of possibility that transcended language. As they flew toward an uncertain future, the first tenuous connection between humanity and the wider universe strengthened, one shared thought at a time. Outside the helicopter window, the sun climbed higher in the sky, the same sun that had nurtured human evolution since time immemorial, now revealed as just one ordinary star among billions that harbored intelligent life. The day ahead would determine whether its light would witness humanity's first steps into a larger community, or its retreat into fearful isolation. Maxwell chose to hope for the former. After all, hope itself was a quality Lyra's people had identified as uniquely, powerfully human. And in that moment, it seemed like enough.